Hello, thank you for taking time out. This video is on the Nakshatra of Swati. Swati, as per mythology, is ruled by Lord Vayu. Lord Vayu is the lord of the wind. And just like the wind which is ever flowing, this nakshatra is also about that. The person is likely to be, I'm referring to the Swati native, to be on the go on a mental and a physical plane. As usual, I'm going to be sharing the mythology linked to Lord Vayu first, and later we'll be going through how different planets behave in Swati. Lord Vayu is known to be the light of the atmosphere. Whenever there is a thunderstorm, we witness the light first. That is an example I'm sharing with you which describes the swiftness of Lord Vayu, the quickness of Lord Vayu. And Lord Vayu, wherever it travels, it is accompanied by a thunder, which is symbolic of the power and strength linked to Lord Vayu. This nakshatra is known to possess the power to scatter like the wind everywhere, which is symbolic of the Swati natives' influence in the society. Not only is Lord Vayu on the go, it's also known for his power and influence. I'd like to share an interesting example. It's a beautiful illustration. In the Ramayana, Hanuman is known to be the spiritual son of Lord Vayu. He was known for his strength. Similarly, in the Mahabharata, Lord Bhima is known to be the spiritual son of Lord Vayu. This symbolizes the power, the strength, the thunder that is accompanied by the wind. That is what Lord Vayu is all about. The Swati native is likely to be a freedom lover, an explorer of some kind. And as I had mentioned earlier, not only on a physical plane, even on a mental plane, the native is likely to be very eager to learn all the time, a researcher. Like in the classroom early on, I'm sure you've seen few students very eager to answer the questions raised by the teachers. Or in a corporate meeting, there's always someone who's very eager to share one's ideas. So this eagerness to not only learn but to also share would be seen in the native's character. And here it's an opportune time for me to reveal that this nakshatra is ruled by Rahu, and Rahu is associated with eagerness. And that eagerness on a physical plane can lead the native to be an explorer. And since the native would have the love for travel, the native would become an excellent navigator. Just the other day I was about to catch a train, and this taxi driver very expertly got me to the train station. I was about to miss the train. He had this excitement of the project of transporting me on time to the train station. So he knew which paths to take, which roads to skip, how to maneuver himself around the traffic. The expertness in getting from A to B in the shortest amount of time. I have personally met individuals through far away who had Swati's influence on their careers and are working as a commercial pilot. So the entire aviation sector, in my view, is directly linked to Swati. In the last video I've posted on the YouTube channel, I had taken the example of Michael Schumacher. The video is called How to Analyze Your Birth Chart. Michael Schumacher has Mars in Swati, which symbolizes that he is using this Martian competitiveness in racing. So car racing is a great example, particularly if Mars is found in this section of the sky. And on a mental plane, this exploration can lead to purification of the mind, since the native is fond of learning about different philosophies, the native might then become very mature in understanding how different people are, how different cultures are. So the native becomes extremely comfortable in adapting to difficult circumstances, changing circumstances, like the stories you hear of digital nomads or nomads who travel from one place to the other with minimum resources. These days this is becoming very common, digital nomadic lifestyle. That, in my view, is a very Swati-like lifestyle. And in the corporate world, where a company is introducing a new policy which might change working style, like 4 days a week, so the person in charge of making sure the transition is smooth and listening to the concerns who might have with the change in policy, that person can be a Swati native. Like they are changing the transportation policy. Individuals working late may not get taxi service provided by the company. So there's a change in policy, and that change is managed professionally by a Swati native. So the Swati native can not only be oneself very good at adapting to changes, the native can even be a change manager. You see that commonly when two companies merge, so two cultures are coming together, that change leads to various problems. A change manager is given that responsibility to make sure that is smooth. Similarly, HR managers is another great example. Different people from different educational and cultural backgrounds come and work in multinational firms. I think a Swati native would do an excellent job at managing their expectations and the expectations that the company is having from those professionals. Furthermore, TV hosts, they get to interview all kinds of celebrities coming from different backgrounds. They have to also adapt their line of questioning. With some individuals, they can push the boundaries of banter. With other individuals, they have to be more serious. A great example I'd like to give you is of Ellen DeGeneres. She also has Swati's influence in her chart. So I've spoken a lot about freedom of travel and flexibility. This, however, leads to instability. Sun is debilitated in the nakshatra of Swati. See, Swati as a nakshatra is not about creating an empire. It's not about that. Staying in one place, in one company, in one role for a long time and building an identity and reaching the top. It's more about hopping from one project to the other, and therefore Sun is debilitated in this nakshatra. And one of the main symbols of Swati is a young plant whose roots are not too deep in the ground. So that is Swati native's character, to keep moving on. Rahu, being its planetary ruler, also is a good explanation why Rahu is given the responsibility of this nakshatra. This nakshatra is all about keep moving on. That's Rahu's nature. Rahu is an agent of change. So on the downside, the native is likely to hop on from one project to the other, perhaps impulsively in some cases, and therefore may lack that stability in life. And the native may also feel the need to experience something new, and in the process the person may give up what one was doing currently. So the native might also not finish the projects one is starting entirely. And since this is all about being on the go, the native might burn oneself out, both on a mental and physical plane. Like a trip to the forest which has lasted for several weeks, or you've been in the process of learning for such a long time that you've become a master of none, a jack of all trades, but a master of none. It wouldn't be a surprise to you that this Nakshatra's classification is Chara, which translates to movable, and the caste assigned to Swati is that of a butcher, which is the caste belonging to researchers, which shouldn't be of any surprise. This nakshatra possesses the guna of rajasic. So this section of the sky is a lot about going after things of the world, experiencing the world. And lastly, it possesses the temperament belonging to a divine force, which is symbolic of the divinity linked to Lord Vayu. The classification, I'm assuming, doesn't need much explanation. There's a list of careers I'd like to share, and in the process we are also going to learn something about this nakshatra. The aviation sector entirely, as I've mentioned earlier, is linked to Swati, so airline pilots, air crew members, air traffic controllers, travel agents, I'm sure you understand why, researchers, flight engineers, ambulance drivers, race car drivers, food delivery drivers, transportation planners, supply chain managers. There's a concept I remember which was called just-in-time inventory that is linked to supply chain, and therefore this arrangement is linked to Swati too. Movers and packers, transporters, therefore emergency responders, firefighters. Wind is known to subside fire if it's blowing very strongly. Then analysts, change managers, talk show hosts, even astronomers. There's another example I'd like to give you is of Edwin Hubble. He also has Swati's influence in his chart, and that's linked to space travel. So when moon is in Swati, I think the native would be very fond of exploration. I personally know someone who has a career in medical research, so that is a possibility if moon is directly linked to your career. And the individual is going to be freedom loving, and in one's 20s specifically, when we are trying to figure things out, a moon Swati-like person may find it more challenging, as the native might have many different ideas. I can do this, I can do that. So a scatterbrain, essentially. Moon also does not share a good relationship with the nakshatra ruler Rahu. It would be important for you to be in a space in your life where there's freedom. Your peace of mind would be linked to the freedom you are feeling in a particular place. So being caught up in conventions or having too many rules to follow, you're going to feel very uncomfortable. This nakshatra is all about being on the go and having that freedom. Digital nomads, freelancers, world travelers, etc., I believe have moon in Swati. Empathy now would also be a strength you'd have. You'd understand how people feel who come from a different place. Like individuals in a company, HR managers who are responsible for welcoming the ones who are joining the company, so they make the ones who are new to the company feel comfortable. Similarly, individuals managing hostels. In a hostel, people come from different backgrounds and they generally travel by themselves. So a moon Swati-like native can empathize and understand how to make them feel more welcomed. The ability to adapt is accompanied by moon's warmth. That's my view of moon in Swati. Sun Swati naturally is going to lead to instability at certain stages in your life, in your career. there would be times when you are figuring things out much longer than usual. Like people in their mid-30s decide, no, I think I have to go for a PhD. And there can also be some lack of understanding the native can have with one's father. The entire chart still has to be seen. The sun represents the relationship we have with our father, and sun is debilitated here. So that is a possibility that the relationship isn't smooth. And I think the native would have this strong desire to break free. And in the process, the native can become a leader, like a leader of nomads. The native can be in charge of individuals who are also in a phase of exploration in their lives, being in charge of a co-working space, which is known to host digital nomads from different countries. So as an owner of a co-working space, you become a leader of a group of people who are in a phase of exploration. That's how I see Sun in Swati. Relations are likely to suffer with authority figures, and you may find yourself running into ego battles at your workspace or in your personal life. You'd feel challenged, particularly if your freedom is restricted. So relationships would have to be managed more carefully with Sun in Swati. Well, Sun is known to eradicate diseases, so Sun in Swati can lead to a career in medical research and discovering healing methods which are futuristic. Rahu is all about the future, so that is also another possibility. Sun altogether isn't very strong in Swati, but I do feel there's an exciting career waiting for you. I think the best part of our 20s and 30s is the exploration we do in our careers. For example, if we are settled too early, we feel a sense of boredom, that my life is monotonous. So monotony wouldn't be part of your journey, particularly in your career. That's my view of Sun in Swati. Mercury in Swati, in my view, make the best researchers. Anything to do with information discovery, whether you're working as a market researcher or for a media house, as a journalist, this is an excellent position. Furthermore, I think you'll have the ability to deal with individuals very flexibly. I think you'll be an excellent negotiator, particularly in a business deal. You'll understand where people are coming from. So a Mercury Swati-like person must try to find a job where there's regular people contact and there's negotiations that need to take place. I'll even include diplomats. If a country has an individual who's a diplomat having Mercury in Swati, I can assure you there'll always be a diplomatic solution to every problem. Mercury is not known for combat, and within the sales sector, I think the native is going to come across as someone who also takes into account the expectations the client has, not only what one's company has to offer, but what the client also needs. That balancing act required in the sales presentation, the native would possess. The major downside is fickleness and restlessness. The native would have the tendency to move on to one thing to the other quickly. The native might say, no, I've already done the project. The deal is already gone through. Any kind of work that requires people contact, the native would be excellent at. The native may not be the best at following procedures and working out details, but would get you a solution no matter what. That's my view of Mercury in Swati. And I find Mercury Swati to be strong here too, as Mercury and Rahu also do not share a bad relationship, unlike the case of Sun and Moon. Venus Swati, like individual, is an excellent relationship builder. Any kind of work that requires hosting individuals who come from a different background, making them feel loved in a new place. So Airbnb hosts, TV hosts, hotel owners. The native would be non-combative in relationships and therefore would know the art of building a relationship. This would also help the individual not encounter circumstances which can lead to confrontation in one's personal relations. Having said that, the native might remain in a phase of exploration in love for a long time. So the entire 20s, the native might be figuring out what kind of relationship do I want to be in? What kind of person do I like? And it's likely the native may attract a person who's foreign to oneself, as Swati is ruled by Rahu. The artistic ability linked to Venus can be expressed through research in this position. So the native can be an art researcher of some kind. The native would feel drawn to exploration one way or the other. And that exploration can also happen not only linked to art but also linked to money, as money is directly associated with Venus. So financial researchers, particularly research centered around speculative markets. And lastly, Venus symbolizes our desires, and the desire to travel, the desire to meet people from different backgrounds, the desire to explore would be very strong. So if you are about to enter Venus's Mahadash and have found Venus in Swati, it's not a bad time to explore the world. That's my view of Venus in Swati. Mars in Swati now leads to exploration, but there also has to be a sense of thrill in your exploration, like the ones who climb mountains. They are exploring one mountain after the other. They spend months in the mountains. They also need a sense of thrill, which is strongly linked to Mars, or they need to compete with others. I earlier had given you the example of Michael Schumacher, who has Mars in Swati. Mars is known for one's engineering prowess, so Mars Swati-like individual can be a researcher in the engineering sector, particularly to do with automobiles, as the automobile sector, in my view, is also linked to Swati, given Swati is a lot to do with transportation. The person can even be an innovator. Mars Swati-like individual can also fight for others. So if you find individuals around you having their freedom taken away from them, you then start fighting for their rights. I have seen lawyers having Mars in Swati, particularly if it finds itself in the 6th house, which has to do with legal battles. And lastly, a Mars Swati-like individual would be so freedom-loving that the native would not be an easy person to work with. A Mars Swati-like individual may lack the diplomatic skills which you'd find if Moon is in Swati or Venus or Mercury. Whilst the person might remain flexible and may adapt quickly to changes, but the native's fight for one's freedom can lead to the native being less flexible, less willing to adapt. Flexibility and adaptability so strongly linked to Swati, but when Mars is there, it may not be the case. Hopping on from one project to the other is another downside to having Mars in Swati. Jupiter Swati, in my view, is a combination belonging to researchers, and this combination can also present to you many opportunities to travel to various places. Jupiter is known to present travel opportunities, and Swati is about travel. What I find interesting here is that the exploration one is doing is on a philosophical plane. So you're moving, for example, from one place to the other or one country to the other for a reason. Like you want to learn the local culture, you want to learn the local art, you'd like to learn the religious practices of different countries. So you're not exploring only for the purpose of pleasure. There's a higher purpose behind your exploration, which can even lead to you being a student of theology or even spirituality. The divinity associated with Swati is likely to be the highlight of this position, Jupiter in Swati. So the native's natural disposition is going to be divine. I think the native would also be able to influence the thinking of others around oneself. The power to scatter like the wind. So the native may come up with philosophies which might inspire, or should I say, might have an impact on large number of people. The native would have the ability to have that influence in the society. I think the worldly side linked to Swati would be controlled, and given Jupiter has a friendly relationship with Rahu, I find this to be a strong position, Jupiter Swati. Saturn Swati is an interesting position as we are now combining freedom and exploration with boundaries. Saturn representing the latter. So here the native can be a caretaker of the ones who are freedom lovers. A great example is looking after individuals who arrive in a foreign country seeking asylum, escaping some violence, for example, in their home country. So the ones who are looking after such individuals or even fighting for such individuals, I believe, have Saturn in Swati. Human rights lawyers, you are protecting the freedom of others. Even you yourself may not enjoy the same freedom. If you are a lawyer, a human rights lawyer, you have a procedure to follow. That is directly linked to Saturn. Saturn Swati can lead to you being a long-term researcher. You'd be very persistent in your research. Every change that you plan in your life, for example, a trip to a foreign country, can be met with some delay, particularly if you are going through Saturn's chapter. So the good news here is unwelcome changes in our life would also be delayed. You might find yourself being given time, like an eviction notice. You have been handed over by your homeowner. If you're renting a property, you'll still have time to slowly transition from one place to the other. So in a way, I find Saturn Swati to be a strong position. And lastly, you can be a follower of an ancient science or a tradition which might be uncommon, or you might serve the society through an ancient science in a new way, for example, with the use of technology, like practicing astrology online. Altogether, I find Saturn Rahu to be a strong position. Also, Saturn and Rahu share a friendly relationship. I think when Rahu is in Swati, you go to the extreme in the process of exploration. So here, not finishing what you've started and being on the go for a very long time, like taking a trip to Southeast Asia and then staying there for 2-3 years without having a plan for the future. And this need for exploration can also lead to you trying things out which aren't always nice. Rahu is linked to addictions, and slowly the native can begin to be seen in the society as an outcast. That's Rahu's nature, and this nakshatra is also ruled by Rahu. The native's life can be very scattered, particularly if you are going through Rahu's Maha or Antadasha. So it might be the case that your office is in one city, you are traveling elsewhere, your family is elsewhere. So life can be very scattered, And the native can also delude oneself into thinking that freedom is essential for one's existence. See, we cannot have 100% freedom. We can't drive on the road as we like. We have to follow rules. So here, with this combination, the native might start promoting the idea of complete freedom, which can lead to the native being guilty of delusion. And the native might also mistake freedom as power. You only need to worry about this position if you are going through Rahu's dasha. On the upside, this position can lead to you being behind scientific inventions, but proper guidance would still be needed. Ketu in Swati can lead to exploration in isolation. So the native might become very fond of spending time with oneself. Like the person takes up a hostel in a new place, stays with the other occupants, but doesn't spend too much time with them. Or the native goes on a trip with friends and then takes off for exploration rather than hanging out in a social circle. And this can lead to answers within. The divinity linked to Swati can become the focus of the native explorations. It can also lead to the native researching on something one has learned in one's past life. Ketu is directly linked to past life skills, and Swati is all about exploration. So the native might research on things the native has learned in one's past lives. This is an interesting position, Ketu in Swati. Exploration in isolation can be very educational and can make the native very independent, but the native can also fall prey to addictions, as Ketu is linked to that. And with the passage of time, the native can be seen as an outcast that's linked to Ketu, and that's also linked to Rahu, who's ruling Swati. I find Ketu Swati to be better than Rahu in Swati, as I think a Rahu Swati like person can be guilty of delusion more than Ketu in Swati, and Ketu Swati like person can be behind scientific inventions driven by piercing logic. Both Rahu and Ketu in Swati, however, would still need proper guidance. Thank you for watching this video till the very end. If you have any questions, please post a comment. And if you'd like to stay in touch, please subscribe to this channel. Thanks again for watching. Bye for now.